January 1942, Kulitz Castle, Saxony. The most escape-proof prison in Nazi Germany, Lieutenant Harry Neve stood at the castle gates in a freshly painted Germanofficer's uniform, forged papers in his pocket, heart pounding against his ribs. German guards surrounded him. One wrong move, one suspicious glance, and Hugh will be shot. But concealed within the fabric of his converted tunic was something extraordinary that German searchers had failed to locate during countless inspections. A navigation device no bigger than your fingernail. Within 2 days, Neve would cross the Swiss border, making history as the first British officer to successfully escape from Kulitz. That minuscule compass, camouflaged perfectly within his uniform, had shown him the path to liberty. This navigational tool that saved Neve wasn't a singular miracle. Documentation from the Imperial War Museum reveals that Mi-9 orchestrated the production and delivery of roughly 2.36 million compasses across multiple design variations. These ingenious devices found their way into trouser fastenings, collar buttons, jacket closures, and waist buckle mechanisms. They slipped past German inspectors who meticulously examined every prisoner, every delivery package, every piece of fabric. Yet somehow they continued functioning flawlessly, consistently pointing men toward home and freedom. German intelligence labeled them an impossibility. British craftsmen simply called it another Tuesday at work. What you're about to discover is the remarkable chronicle of how a Birmingham packaging entrepreneur who once dared to challenge the legendary Houdini engineered the most brilliant escape apparatus of World War II, a compass so microscopic it disappeared inside a button, so cunningly designed it deceived Nazi inspectors for years, and so remarkably effective it played a crucial role in the broader mission that saw tens of thousands of Allied servicemen, often estimated around 35,000, either escape captivity or evade capture throughout occupied Europe, the challenge confronting British intelligence in 1940 was absolutely unprecedented. Following the Dunkirk evacuation, thousands of British troops found themselves stranded deep in enemy territory or imprisoned in POW facilities scattered across Nazi-controlled Europe. Germany maintained an extensive network of detention centers. Officer lags confined commissioned ranks, Starlags detained enlisted personnel, Luftwaffe facilities such as Starlag Luft 3 imprisoned captured airmen. By 1944, more than 170,000 British and Commonwealth service members would be locked within these compounds. The Air Ministry understood that as Bomber Command operations expanded, hundreds of aircrew would be shot down over hostile territory monthly. A single Lancaster bomber required a crew of 7 men, a Halifax needed 7, a Sterling carried 7 or 8. Every mission over Germany put dozens of crews at risk. Each qualified pilot embodied 2 years of training investment and thousands of accumulated flight hours. Each navigator had achieved mastery in celestial navigation, dead reckoning, and the intricate skill of locating targets through darkness over completely blacked-out enemy landscapes. Each wireless operator, each flight engineer, each gunner was practically irreplaceable given the rate at which Bomber Command was losing them, abandoning these highly trained men to languish in German prison facilities wasn't merely morally reprehensible. It represented strategic catastrophe. On December 23, 1939, the War Office created Mi-9. The mission statement was straightforward in theory, yet nearly unachievable in practice. Assist captured British personnel in escaping, help evaders trapped behind enemy lines reach safety, accomplish everything covertly, execute operations at massive scale, and achieve all this while Germans devoted every available resource toward preventing precisely these outcomes. The War Office itself harbored doubts. Numerous senior officers viewed the entire concept of planning for capture as defeatist thinking. Why prepare soldiers to escape when their focus should remain on achieving victory? Major Norman Crockett, the decorated stockbroker, turned intelligence operative who led Mi-9, dismissed this criticism entirely. He grasped what the skeptics failed to comprehend. Every man who broke free tied up German resources in manhunts. Every successful evasion proved that capture didn't mean the end, and every returning airman delivered intelligence about enemy territory, escape routes, and resistance networks that no conventional spy could have possibly gathered. Crockett required someone who approached problems unconventionally, someone capable of solving challenges that traditional minds considered beyond possibility. In May 1940, just weeks before France collapsed, he discovered the perfect candidate. Christopher Clayton Hutton was 47 years old, a journalist who hadn't succeeded, a businessman who'd gone bankrupt, and remarkably, the only person in Britain who had ever challenged Harry Houdini to an escape competition. Back in 1913, young Hutton had suggested constructing a packing crate on stage from which Houdini would attempt to break free. The legendary escape artist accepted the challenge. Houdini escaped successfully anyway, having bribed the carpenter beforehand, but Hutton absorbed a valuable lesson that day. Escape wasn't about physical strength, it was about meticulous preparation, skillful concealment, and anticipating your adversary's moves several steps ahead. When Crockett interviewed Hutton for MI9, the Houdini anecdote clinched the appointment. Crockett reportedly informed him that conventional approaches were completely useless. They needed fresh, innovative thinking. Hutton received an office, a minimal budget, and an assignment that seemed utterly impossible. Design escape equipment that could remain hidden from German searchers, be smuggled into POW camps, and be utilized by untrained personnel to navigate hundreds of miles through enemy-held territory. Hutton consulted Lieutenant Johnny Evans, among the rare successful escapers from the First World War. Evans provided him with a straightforward formula. Every escaper required 3 essential elements: maps to indicate the route, compasses to establish direction, and food to maintain energy throughout the journey. Maps presented a solvable challenge. Hutton pioneered printing techniques on silk fabric, which produced no sound, resisted water damage, and could be compressed into spaces where no paper map could possibly fit. Food proved more difficult but remained manageable through concentrated rations and chocolate infused with stimulants. Compasses represented the genuine problem. A standard compass was far too bulky to hide effectively. Even pocket-sized compasses were instantly recognizable to any German guard. Hutton needed something dramatically smaller, something that resembled an everyday object, something that could survive inspection while still operating precisely enough to guide a man across hundreds of miles of enemy terrain during nighttime. Travel. He contacted Britain's major instrument manufacturing firms. Every single company refused his request. They informed him that miniaturizing a compass to his specified dimensions was simply beyond the realm of possibility. The engineering precision required exceeded existing technological capabilities. The magnetic force would be insufficiently weak, the pivot mechanism excessively fragile. It couldn't be accomplished. Hutton discovered Blunt Brothers as his alternative. This modest London company employed 2 instrument craftsmen named George Waterlow and Dick Richards, who didn't recognize the word impossible in their vocabulary. When Hutton described his requirements, they didn't tell him it was unachievable. According to Hutton's personal account, they confidently stated they could manufacture 5,000 units weekly. The technical specifications of their creation remain impressive even by contemporary standards. The standard pillbox escape compass measured merely 0.6 inches in diameter, 15 millimeters smaller than a typical shirt button. The brass casing featured walls only 0.015 inches thick. A swaged glass covering created a completely hermetic seal protecting the delicate mechanism contained within. A magnetized compass card balanced on a brass pivot pin with such extraordinary precision that it could accurately detect magnetic north despite being small enough to conceal inside a tunic button. The dry compass design proved absolutely critical. Liquid-filled compasses could freeze solid in the harsh European winters that escapers would inevitably encounter. These compasses utilized air, enabling them to function everywhere from the frozen forests of Norway to the mountain passages of the Pyrenees. Radium luminescent paint marked north with a single dot and south with 2 dots, permitting navigation in absolute darkness without any light source that might reveal the escaper's location. But the true genius wasn't confined to the compass mechanism alone. It extended to the concealment methodology. Now, before we examine how these devices performed under actual field conditions, if you're appreciating this exploration of British engineering brilliance, hit that subscribe button. It takes just a moment, costs you nothing whatsoever, and significantly helps the channel expand. Right. Let's discover what transpired when these buttons reached the prison camps. The trouser fly button compass employed an even more ingenious two-component system. One button contained a pivot point, the other housed a magnetized steel disc. When sewn onto a uniform, they appeared identical to standard trouser buttons. No German guard would give them a second thought. But when detached and balanced together, the magnetized button would gradually rotate until it aligned with magnetic north, tunic buttons unscrewed to expose, pillbox compasses concealed internally. Belt buckles contained folding pivot mechanisms. Collar studs featured white painted glass surfaces that could be scratched away to reveal a compass dial underneath. Bakelite waistcoat buttons had magnetized steel bars embedded directly into the plastic during the molding process, allowing the entire button to function as a compass needle when suspended from thread. Then arrived the masterstroke. When German guards inevitably uncovered some of these concealment techniques, Hutton adapted his approach. He ordered production modifications changing from standard right-hand threading to left-hand threading. When German guards attempted to unscrew suspicious buttons by rotating counterclockwise, they would actually tighten them further instead. This simple reversal fooled camp inspectors for many additional months. Production capacity expanded rapidly. Blunt Brothers delivered their promised 5,000 compasses every week. Additional manufacturers joined the operation. By war's end, Mi-9 had distributed over 2.3 million compasses through various concealment methods. The pillbox compass alone reached RAF aircrew across every bomber and fighter squadron. Trouser button compasses were sewn into uniforms before they were issued. Care packages sent to POW camps contained compasses hidden inside games, books, and food containers that German sensors never detected. The outcomes demonstrated themselves through individual survival stories. Harry Neve's escape from Colditz in January 1942 validated the system's effectiveness. His Mi-9 escape report, now declassified and stored at the National Archives, documents precisely how he utilized his concealed compass to navigate toward Switzerland. He maintained a compass bearing to Ramsen and was interned at 1 o'clock in the morning. Neve subsequently joined Mi-9 himself and directed operations for the Comet Line, one of the legendary escape networks that returned over 1,000 personnel to Britain. Flight Lieutenant Eon Crichton of Stalag Luft 3 provides another documented example. Shot down while returning from a Berlin bombing mission in 1943, his trouser button compass was preserved by his daughter. Sheila Webb, the International Bomber Command Center, verified that Mi-9 dispatched aid packages containing concealed escape items to the camps where Crichton was imprisoned. His compass recently went viral with over 1 million views when his daughter shared its remarkable story. At Stalag Luft 3, the camp immortalized by the Great Escape film, prisoners Al Haik and Johnny Travis served as the official compass manufacturers. They fabricated compasses from fragments of broken Bakelite gramophone records, melted and molded to incorporate tiny needles made from slivers of magnetized razor blades. These improvised devices were stamped with dark humor, made in Stalag Luft 3. Patent pending, the 35,000 figure that Mi-9, referenced for successful escapes and evasions, encompasses the complete scope of their achievement, though intellectual honesty requires context. This number includes both escapers who broke out of POW camps and evaders who avoided capture while operating behind enemy lines. The distinction carries significance. Escapers had to break out of heavily guarded facilities, often tunneling for months or exploiting brief lapses in security. Evaders were downed aircrew or soldiers separated from their units who reached safety before Germans could apprehend them. The escape lines that wound through occupied Europe were the vital arteries through which these men traveled. The Comet line operated from Belgium through France to Spain, managed by a network of Belgian and French civilians who risked execution to shelter Allied airmen in safe houses. provide civilian clothing, and guide them over the Pyrenees Mountains. Between 700 and 800 personnel passed through the Comet Line to safety, the Patelieri Line, named after its Belgian founder who adopted a French alias, assisted between 600 and 3,000 evaders, through southern France to Spain or by sea to Gibraltar. These networks couldn't function without navigation equipment. An evader might spend weeks moving between safe houses, but eventually he would face stretches of hostile territory without any guide. Crossing the Pyrenees meant days of mountain travel without local assistance. A compass small enough to hide from German patrols but accurate enough to maintain direction through fog and darkness could mean the difference between reaching Spain and wandering in circles until German mountain troops discovered you. Me-9's own calculations and subsequent historical accounts place the total escapers and evaders in the tens of thousands, frequently quoted around 35,000 Allied personnel. Counts for specific subcategories vary between sources depending on geographic theater and time period. But what remained absolutely consistent was the role of navigation equipment in making escape achievable. The sobering reality behind these successes deserves recognition. Out of 10,000 RAF prisoners held in German camps, only 30 accomplished successful home runs back to Britain. Escape was extraordinarily difficult, but those 30 men demonstrated it was possible, and the compass buttons that assisted them represented British engineering solving problems that German intelligence could never fully neutralize. The Germans certainly attempted to counter these efforts. Camp security at facilities like Stalag Luft III employed specialized guards called ferrets dedicated entirely to escape detection. These guards could enter any barracks without warning, carrying metal probes, while English-speaking ferrets concealed themselves beneath barracks to eavesdrop on escape planning discussions. The Germans buried seismograph microphones 9 feet underground to detect tunneling activities. They selected camp locations featuring distinctive yellow sand that made any disturbed soil immediately visible against the gray surface dirt. Despite all these countermeasures, the sheer volume of Mi-9 equipment overwhelmed German inspection capacity. Not every care package contained contraband materials. Not every button concealed a compass. The Germans couldn't check everything thoroughly. Mi-9 ensured that sufficient equipment penetrated camp security to make a difference. German escape compasses did exist, but direct comparison reveals British superiority. The Luftwaffe escape compass measured similar dimensions to British versions, but construction quality was visibly inferior with seams showing obvious soldering marks. More significantly, German strategic circumstances meant they never developed sophisticated escape equipment. Luftwaffe pilots operated primarily over friendly or home territory. They rarely flew missions where capture behind enemy lines was likely. The German designs appear to have been copied from captured British equipment. The Americans established their equivalent organization, Miss X, in October 1942 at Fort Hunt, Virginia. This was nearly 3 years after Mi-9 began operations. American compass buttons were larger at 0.73 inches diameter compared to the British 0.6 inches. They used hinged openings rather than screw tops. American firms such as the Scoville Company of Waterbury, Connecticut produced button-style compasses for Miss X, with some contemporary accounts claiming production in the millions. But American aircrew operating over Europe received their escape equipment directly from Mi-9. The Americans took the lead only in Pacific and Far East operations. British advantages included the 3-year head start, a dedicated inventor with an escapologist's understanding of concealment, far greater variety in hiding methods, and continuous innovation that stayed ahead of German countermeasures. The reverse threading adaptation alone demonstrated an agility that German camp security couldn't match. Mi-9 began winding down operations after the war. Administrative closure continued into 1946, with some records noting September 30th of that year, though many accounts used dissolved 1945 as shorthand. The organization that senior war office figures had dismissed as defeatist thinking had helped tens of thousands of men reach safety. It had developed technologies that remain in military service today: current NATO survival, escape, And evasion kits include liquid-filled 20mm button compasses manufactured to Ministry of Defense, standards established during the Second World War. The SEER program that trains American and British Special Forces traces its origins directly to Mi-9 methods. The 1943 pattern. Escape flying boots with detachable leggings that converted to civilian shoes and hollow heels containing maps, compass, and knife established templates for survival equipment that persist 8 decades later. Modern covert compasses. Explicitly acknowledge being inspired by the escape compasses developed during the war. Christopher Clayton Hutton, the man who challenged Houdini, received an MBE for his work. He published his memoir, Official Secret, in 1960, though security restrictions meant he couldn't tell the full story until decades after the war. George Waterlow and Dick Richards, the instrument makers who said yes when every major manufacturer said impossible, returned to their small London workshop and continued making precision instruments until retirement. The compass buttons themselves survive in museums worldwide. The Imperial War Museum holds documented specimens, including fly button compasses and RF escape button compasses with full provenance. The Australian War Memorial maintains a comprehensive collection with detailed documentation. The National Archives at Kew preserve the original Mi-9 records, including escape reports that name specific equipment used by successful escapers. Collectors today prize authentic examples, though counterfeits abound. Genuine buttons are identifiable by correct thread direction for their era. Proper manufacturer marks from firms like Birmingham Buttons, Furman, or J.R. Gaunt, and traces of original radium paint that still faintly glows after 8 decades, standing. At the gates of Colditz Castle in January 1942, Ari Neve carried the accumulated ingenuity of British engineering hidden in his clothing. A compass the size of a thumbnail, a map printed on silk stuffed into his shoe, forged papers created by fellow prisoners, and the knowledge that an entire secret organization existed to help men like him find their way home. The Germans had constructed the most escape-proof prison in the Reich. They had searchlights and guard dogs and informers and ferrets. They had seismograph microphones and inspection teams and years of experience catching escapers. They never discovered the compass sewn into his tunic lining. British engineering wasn't about building the biggest or the most obvious. It was about solving the impossible problem with the elegant solution. It was about a button that looked like every other button, a compass that fit in a space no compass should fit, an idea that major manufacturers said couldn't work. Built by 2 instrument makers in a small London workshop who simply refused to accept the word impossible, tens of thousands of men found their way home. A tiny British button showed them the way.